We need to talk about this. I don't want to. You can't keep avoiding it. Just leave me alone. What? No, this can't be happening.
The situation is escalating rapidly.
We have to do something now. What's happening? Oh my God! No, get there!
Mom, what's happening?
I don't know, honey. Just watch.
They whispered her name whenever she passed. Some did it softly, others with sharp tongues and tired eyes. In that village, everyone believed they knew the truth about everyone else. So when a young woman moved differently, worked differently, and lived differently, they decided the answer was simple. She was lazy. That was the word they used, the word that stuck to her like dust on bare feet. But what they didn't know was that sometimes the quietest stories carry the loudest secrets. The village sat where the red earth met tall grasses that danced with the wind. Every morning the sun rose early and with it rose the people. Roosters crowed, fires crackled, and women stepped out with baskets balanced on their heads. Children ran with laughter, and men prepared their tools for the long day ahead. In this place work was not just survival, it was pride. If you worked hard you were respected. If you didn't, people talked. Her name was rarely spoken with kindness. She was young but not careless, strong but often slow. While others rushed to the farms at sunrise, she stayed behind. While other women pounded grain and fetched water before the heat grew heavy, she sat quietly outside her small home, watching the dust rise from busy feet passing by. To the villagers it looked like she didn't care. To them, it looked like she had chosen idleness over effort. The elders noticed. The women noticed. Even the children noticed. Why does she behave like that? They asked. Why does she move as if time does not matter to her? No one asked her directly. In African folktales, silence often becomes proof, and her silence was loud. Soon the label followed her everywhere. Lazy. Useless. A burden. Her mother defended her when she could, but even love grows tired under constant judgment. Her father said little, his eyes heavy with worry. He had raised her to be strong, yet now the village looked at his daughter with disappointment. At gatherings people avoided sitting near her. When food was shared, her portion was measured with care as if she had not earned it. And still she said nothing. At night, when the village finally slept, strange things happened. Fires burned lower, dogs went quiet, and the wind carried sounds that did not belong to sleep. Some swore they saw her walking alone under the moon, her steps slow and careful. Others claimed they heard her whispering words no one could understand. These stories spread like wildfire, turning judgment into suspicion. In African tales, mystery is feared almost as much as laziness. Yet, every time something went wrong in the village, her name appeared in the conversation. When crops failed on one side of the land, they said she had brought bad luck. When a child fell sick, some blamed her strange behavior. It became easier to point at her than to search for real answers. She carried their fear quietly, like a heavy pot balanced on her head, never letting it fall. But there was something no one noticed. On the days she stayed behind, she wasn't resting. When she moved slowly, she wasn't weak. When she avoided the crowds, it wasn't because she felt better than anyone else. There was a reason hidden beneath her calm face, a reason tied to something older than the village itself. Something the elders had forgotten, and the young had never been taught. One evening, as the sky turned orange and the air cooled, something changed. She did not return home when she usually did. Her mother waited. Her father stood by the door. Neighbors watched from a distance, their curiosity sharp. Hours passed and the moon climbed high. Then, from the edge of the forest, a sound echoed through the village. It was not a cry, not a song, but something in between. People gathered, fear mixing with curiosity. Torches were lit. Whispers filled the air. For the first time, the word lazy did not come easily to their lips. Instead, a new question formed, one that made their hearts beat faster. What if they were wrong? What if the behavior they mocked was hiding something powerful, something dangerous, or something sacred? As the sound grew closer, the villagers realized they were about to face the truth they had ignored for so long. And whatever that truth was, it would change how they saw her forever. But by then it might already be too late. The torches shook in nervous hands as the villagers stood at the edge of the clearing. No one rushed forward. No one laughed. The sound from the forest faded as suddenly as it had come, leaving behind a heavy silence that pressed against their chests. They waited, listening, hoping someone else would move first. But the forest remained still, dark, and watching. Her parents were the first to step ahead. Her mother called her name, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. There was no answer. Only the soft rustle of leaves and the distant cry of a night bird. The villagers exchanged uneasy looks. Some wanted to go back home, pretending they had seen nothing. Others felt a pull they could not explain, as if the night itself was asking them to follow. As they stood there, memories began to surface. Small details they had ignored before now felt important. An elder remembered how the girl had once stopped him from walking into a certain part of the forest, gently placing her hand on his arm and shaking her head. A woman recalled how her cooking fire had suddenly gone out one afternoon, only to be relit moments later by the girl without flint or spark. At the time they had laughed it off. Now those moments felt different. The forest had always been part of their lives, but it was not a place of comfort after dark. In African folktales, the forest holds stories older than people, secrets passed down through silence and fear. Children were warned never to wander too far, especially at night. Yet she had always walked near its edge, calm and unafraid, as if she understood something the rest of them did not. Her childhood had not been unusual at first. She had laughed like other children, run through the fields and played by the river. But as she grew older, she began to change. She listened more than she spoke. She paused before every task as if waiting for a signal no one else could hear. When asked why she moved so slowly, she would only smile faintly and lower her eyes. Her mother once asked her directly, late one night when the fire was low and the village was quiet. "My child, why do you carry yourself this way? The people are talking." The girl had leaned closer and whispered something so soft it barely sounded like words. Her mother's face had gone pale, and she never spoke of that conversation again. From that day on, she watched her daughter with both love and fear. The elders began to argue in low voices near the clearing. Some said this was the work of spirits. Others warned against speaking such things aloud. One elder reminded them of old stories, tales of chosen ones and unseen duties, of people marked from birth to walk a path no one else could see. The younger men dismissed him, saying those were just stories meant to scare children. But even they held their torches tighter. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the trees, the girl moved with purpose. Her steps were still slow, but they were steady. She paused often, listening, feeling the ground beneath her feet. The forest was not silent to her. It spoke in signs, in shifts of wind and shadow. Tonight it felt different, heavier, as if something long asleep was stirring. She remembered the dreams she had as a child. Dreams of fire that did not burn, of voices calling her by a name she did not recognize. She had learned early that these dreams were not meant to be shared. When she tried once as a young girl, the laughter and fear in people's eyes taught her to keep quiet. Silence became her shield, even as it turned others against her. Back at the village, fear began to spread faster than reason. Some villagers blamed her openly now, saying she had invited danger upon them all. Others felt guilt creeping into their hearts. Had they pushed her into this? Had their words and whispers driven her toward something she could no longer avoid? A sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing several torches at once. Gasps filled the air. The elders fell silent. In that moment, everyone felt it, a presence moving just beyond sight. Not evil, not kind, but powerful. Ancient. The kind of power that demands respect, whether you understand it or not. Her father stepped forward, his voice breaking as he spoke her name into the darkness. He did not accuse. He did not demand. He simply called, like a man who knew his child was carrying a weight too heavy for one heart alone. The forest answered with another sound, closer this time, sending a chill through every spine. And as the villagers stood frozen between fear and regret, one truth slowly began to rise among them. Whatever she was doing, whatever she had been preparing for all these years, it was far bigger than laziness. And once it revealed itself, their village would never be the same again. The forest seemed to breathe as the girl moved deeper between the trees. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of earth and leaves, and every sound felt louder than it should have been. She could feel eyes on her, not watching in anger, but in waiting. This was not the first time she had walked this path, but it was the first time she had been called so strongly. Her heart beat fast, yet her face remained calm, the way it always did when the world around her felt uncertain. Back in the village, the elders gathered near the fire, arguing in hushed but urgent voices. One elder insisted they should follow her into the forest before dawn broke. Another warned that interfering could bring consequences worse than fear. In African folktales, there are moments when humans must choose between curiosity and respect, and no one ever agrees on which is safer. The village felt split, caught between protecting one of their own and protecting themselves. Her mother sat apart from the others, rocking gently, her eyes fixed on the dark line where the forest began. She remembered the day her daughter was born, how the wind had suddenly risen, knocking over pots and rattling roofs. The village midwife had paused and whispered a blessing under her breath. At the time it felt strange but harmless. Now that memory burned like a warning she had ignored for too long. The children, sensing fear, clung to their parents. They whispered stories they had heard, mixing truth with imagination. Some said the girl had powers she did not understand. Others believed she had been chosen by something that lived beyond the trees. These whispers, passed from mouth to mouth, began shaping a new story, one filled with awe and dread instead of mockery. Deep in the forest, the girl reached a clearing where the moonlight spilled freely onto the ground. She stopped and knelt, placing her hand on the soil. It was warm, pulsing softly as if the land itself had a heartbeat. She closed her eyes, remembering the lessons taught to her not by people, but by signs, dreams, and long silences. This was why she moved slowly. Why she waited. Rushing had never been an option. From another part of the village, a young man watched the forest with regret heavy on his face. He had once laughed the loudest when others called her lazy. He had mocked her quiet ways, thinking strength was shown only through sweat and speed. Now, as fear crept into his chest, he wondered how wrong he had been. He wondered if words could wound deeper than sticks or stones. The night stretched on, refusing to release its hold. Dogs whimpered and hid beneath huts. The fire flickered low, as if unsure whether to stay lit. A sudden sound echoed again, not as loud as before, but clearer. It sounded like a call, not meant for everyone but meant for her alone. The elders fell silent, their arguments dying on their lips. In the clearing, the girl stood slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. She could feel something rising, something she had prepared for since she was old enough to understand fear. This was the burden she carried while others accused her of doing nothing. Every step she had taken, every pause she had made, had been part of this unseen duty. Yet even now, she was not sure what would be asked of her before the night ended. Her father could no longer remain still. Against the elders' warnings, he took a torch and stepped toward the forest. His love outweighed his fear. Others followed at a distance, torn between loyalty and terror. They moved quietly, guided by flickers of light and pounding hearts, unaware of how close they were to crossing a line that could not be uncrossed. As the villagers entered the forest, the air seemed to change. Sounds faded, and the torchlight felt weaker, as if swallowed by shadow. Some turned back, unable to go on. Those who continued felt their doubts grow heavier with every step. This was no longer about a girl they misunderstood. It was about forces they barely remembered, stories they had dismissed as old myths. In the clearing, the girl sensed movement beyond the trees. She knew the village had followed her, even though she had hoped they wouldn't. Her chest tightened. Whatever was coming was not meant to be shared, not yet. The tension between her duty and her love for her people pulled at her like opposing winds. The forest grew quiet again, holding its breath. The villagers reached the edge of the clearing just as the moon slipped behind a cloud. For a moment, no one could see clearly. Then, slowly, something began to shift in the darkness, and everyone realized they were standing on the edge of a truth that could change everything they believed. The cloud slid away from the moon, and pale light spilled back into the clearing. What the villagers saw made them stop where they stood. The girl was in the center, calm and still, her posture steady as if she had been waiting for them all along. She did not look surprised. She did not look afraid. That alone unsettled them more than any strange sound from the forest. No one spoke at first. The fire from the torches flickered low, as though unsure whether it belonged there. The elders felt their confidence drain away. This was no longer a place where commands felt strong. Even the bravest among them sensed that something unseen was standing between their words and the girl. She slowly lifted her head and looked toward the edge of the clearing. Her eyes did not accuse, but they held a quiet sadness. In that moment, many villagers felt a sting of shame. They remembered every whisper, every insult, every time they turned their backs on her. Yet the fear did not leave. If anything, it grew heavier, pressing down on their chests. The wind picked up again, circling the clearing in a slow, deliberate motion. Leaves rustled, not wildly but with purpose. It felt like a warning, gentle but firm. The forest was listening. The girl closed her eyes and took a deep breath, grounding herself the way she had learned to do over many years. This was the moment she had prepared for, though she had hoped it would never come like this. Her father stepped forward, his torch shaking. "My child," he said softly, his voice breaking. "If there is something you have been carrying alone, let us help you." His words hung in the air, fragile and honest. The girl opened her eyes and for a brief second, her calm cracked. Fear flashed across her face, quickly hidden but not quickly enough. She wanted to speak. She wanted to explain everything from the dreams to the signs to the long nights spent listening to the land. But the weight of what she knew pressed against her throat. Some things she had been taught could not be spoken too soon. Words had power and once released they could not be taken back. Behind her, deeper in the forest, something moved. Not fast, not loud, but enough to be felt. The ground beneath the villagers' feet seemed to hum, a low vibration that traveled up their legs. A few people cried out in fear. Others dropped their torches, watching the flames die as if swallowed by the earth itself. The elders tried to regain control, calling out prayers and old protective words they barely remembered. Their voices overlapped, tangled with panic. In African folktales, there are moments when tradition is tested, when old knowledge proves thinner than believed. This was one of those moments. The girl raised her hand and slowly the voices faded. Not because she demanded silence but because something about her presence asked for it. Even the wind softened, waiting. She looked back at the villagers one last time, her gaze lingering on her parents, on the children peeking from behind trembling legs, on those who had mocked her and those who had doubted. "I never wanted this," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words carried farther than they should have, wrapping around every ear in the clearing. "I only wanted to protect what I could." Her mother gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. The villagers leaned in, desperate for answers. But before the girl could say more, the forest responded. A deep sound rolled through the trees, ancient and powerful, not angry but commanding. The moonlight dimmed, shadows stretching unnaturally across the clearing. The ground trembled again, stronger this time. Branches bent inward, framing the space as if sealing it off from the rest of the world. The villagers realized they were no longer just witnesses. They were part of whatever was unfolding. Fear turned into raw anticipation. Every breath felt like it might be the last normal one they would take. The girl turned toward the darkness behind her, her shoulders straightening. Whatever was coming, she would face it. This was why she had walked slowly all her life. Why she had waited. Why she had carried the name lazy without fighting back. Strength, she knew, did not always look loud. As the unseen presence drew closer, the air grew warm, heavy with meaning. The villagers stood frozen, caught between wanting to run and needing to know the truth. The forest held them there, patient and unyielding. And just as the girl took her first step forward into the deepest shadow, the night fell completely silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would do next. The silence broke without warning. Not with a sound, but with a feeling, sharp and sudden, like the air had tightened around every heart in the clearing. The girl froze mid-step. Something was wrong. This was not how it was supposed to happen. The presence she had felt her whole life was there, yes, but now there was something else woven into it, something unfamiliar and restless. The shadows behind her shifted, stretching longer than before. The villagers gasped as shapes began to form where darkness should not have had shape at all. It was subtle, almost easy to miss, but the forest no longer felt like a single force. It felt divided. The elders sensed it too, their faces paling as old memories returned, stories passed down in fragments, warnings that were never fully explained. One elder fell to his knees, his voice trembling as he whispered a name no one had heard spoken in generations. A name tied to balance, to duty, and to punishment when balance was broken. The villagers looked at him in confusion, but fear spread quickly when they saw tears running down his face. Whatever he remembered, it was not a comforting tale. The girl slowly lowered her raised hand. Her breath grew shallow. This was not just her burden anymore. This was bigger than the dreams, bigger than the signs she had followed since childhood. The forest was not only calling her. It was responding to something the village had done, or failed to do, long before she was born. Her mother cried out her name again, louder this time, desperation cutting through her voice. The girl turned, wanting to run back, to hold her, to say everything would be fine. But the ground beneath her feet pulsed once more, rooting her in place. She understood then, with painful clarity, that stepping away now could bring consequences far worse than staying. Behind the villagers, the wind surged suddenly, slamming into them like an invisible wall. Torches that had survived until now were blown out all at once, plunging the forest edge into darkness. Panic rippled through the crowd. Some screamed. Others prayed. A few tried to flee only to find their legs refusing to move, as if the land itself had claimed them. The young man who once mocked her felt his knees buckle. He remembered laughing, calling her lazy, saying she would never amount to anything. Now, faced with forces he could not understand, shame burned hotter than fear. He realized too late that strength had been standing quietly among them all along, and they had chosen to ignore it. The presence in the forest grew heavier, pressing down on the clearing. Leaves lifted from the ground, swirling slowly in the air, circling the girl as if recognizing her. But then the other force pushed back, colder, sharper, disrupting the rhythm. The air crackled with tension, like a storm building without rain. The girl closed her eyes, fighting to steady herself. She had been taught to prepare, to wait, to listen. But no lesson had warned her of this. Two forces pulling in opposite directions. Two paths opening where only one should exist. Her hands trembled for the first time, and the villagers saw it. The calm they had feared was breaking, revealing the weight she had carried alone. "This was not meant for all of you," she said, her voice shaking but strong enough to carry. "Something has been disturbed." Her words sent a chill through the crowd. Disturbed how? And by whom? No one dared to ask. One of the elders looked toward the village, his eyes wide with realization. He remembered a decision made years ago, a shortcut taken to protect the people from hunger, a promise to the land that was never properly honored. At the time, nothing bad had happened. Or so they thought. Now, standing at the edge of the forest, he understood the cost had only been delayed. The ground cracked slightly beneath the girl's feet, a thin line spreading outward like a warning. She opened her eyes, fear and determination colliding within them. Whatever was awakening did not care about excuses or time past. It wanted balance restored, and it had chosen this moment, this night, to demand it. Her father tried to step forward again, but an unseen force stopped him cold. His heart broke as he realized he could not protect her from this. Not with his body. Not with his love. This was a battle fought on a level beyond human strength. The forest groaned, a deep, ancient sound that rolled through the trees and into the bones of everyone present. The two forces pressed closer, the air between them tightening around the girl like a closing circle. She stood at the center, the quiet one they had called lazy, now the only thing holding the village between peace and something far more terrible. And as the night deepened and the tension reached its breaking point, one question echoed silently through every mind in the clearing. What would happen if she failed to choose the right path, and what would the village lose if she succeeded? The forest roared without sound, a pressure so strong it forced everyone to their knees. The girl stood alone, trembling now, no longer hidden behind silence. The two forces closed in, one warm and steady like a deep heartbeat, the other sharp and cold, cutting through the air like regret given form. She finally understood what the dreams had been preparing her for. This moment was never about her alone. It was about choice, sacrifice, and truth long ignored. She took a slow breath and pressed her bare feet firmly into the cracked earth. The land answered her, the hum growing steadier. She raised both hands, palms open, not in defiance but in acceptance. The swirling leaves froze in midair. The villagers watched, breathless, as the forest seemed to lean toward her, waiting. "I stayed quiet because I was listening," she said, her voice stronger now, echoing far beyond the clearing. "I moved slowly because I was learning. You called me lazy because you could not see what I was carrying." Her words landed heavy, each one cutting through years of judgment. Some villagers wept openly. Others bowed their heads in shame. The elder who remembered the broken promise crawled forward, his voice cracking as he confessed. He spoke of the land deal made during a season of hunger, of sacred ground disturbed without proper rites, of warnings ignored in favor of survival. Each word seemed to feed the cold force in the forest, causing it to surge forward, demanding repayment. The girl turned toward it, fear flickering but not taking hold. "The debt is real," she said softly. "But it does not have to destroy us." She placed her hand over her heart, then lowered it to the ground. The warmth surged, pushing back against the cold. The two forces collided, sending a shockwave through the clearing. Trees bent. The villagers cried out. The ground split wider, glowing faintly from within. For a moment, it felt as if everything might be lost. Then she made her choice. She stepped forward into the space between the forces, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. Her scream tore through the night, raw and human, carrying years of loneliness, fear, and quiet strength. Light burst outward, not blinding but powerful, wrapping around the clearing like an unseen shield. The cold force recoiled, not defeated, but calmed. The warmth deepened, settling into the land like a promise renewed. The forest exhaled. Slowly the trembling stopped. Leaves drifted back to the ground. The cracks in the earth sealed, leaving only faint scars behind. Silence returned, different this time. Softer. The villagers lifted their heads, stunned. The danger had passed. The presence withdrew, fading back into the forest, leaving the clearing untouched but changed. Relief washed through the crowd, followed quickly by gratitude and awe. They turned toward the girl, ready to praise her, to call her a savior, to erase every cruel word they had ever spoken. But she was already falling. Her father reached her just in time, catching her as her knees buckled. Her body was warm, her breath shallow. Fear surged again, sharper than before. Had the forest taken too much? Had the price been her life? Her eyes fluttered open and she smiled faintly. "It's done," she whispered. "For now." The villagers sighed in relief, some laughing through tears. They lifted her gently, carrying her back toward the village with a care they had never shown before. Days passed. The land healed. Crops grew stronger. The air felt lighter. The villagers spoke of her with reverence now, teaching children to listen, to respect silence, to understand that not all work is seen. They called her wise. They called her chosen. But then the final twist revealed itself. As she recovered, the girl no longer dreamed. The voices that once guided her were gone. The signs fell silent. One night, as she sat alone beneath the stars, she realized the truth with a quiet ache. In restoring the balance, she had given up the very gift that made her different. The forest no longer spoke to her because it no longer needed her. She was free. Free to live as she chose, but no longer protected by what once set her apart. In the distance, beyond the edge of the land, the wind shifted again, carrying a faint echo of something stirring elsewhere. The balance had been restored here, but the world was wide, and old forces never sleep forever. The girl looked toward the darkness, her expression calm but knowing. And this time, she wondered who would be ready to listen when the silence returned. Morning came gently after that long night. The sun rose as it always had, spilling light over the red earth, touching rooftops, warming faces that had barely slept. But the village was no longer the same. People stepped outside quietly as if afraid to disturb something sacred. They looked at the land, at the trees, at one another with new eyes. The forest stood calm at the edge of the village, no longer heavy with tension, just present, like an old guardian returning to rest. The girl recovered slowly. 4 days she rested, her body weak but her spirit steady. Villagers came one by one, bringing food, water, and soft words. Some apologized openly, their voices trembling. Others said nothing, letting their actions speak instead. She accepted it all with a quiet grace, never once reminding them of what they had called her. The word lazy faded from the village, spoken only in regretful whispers, then not at all. Her parents stayed close, watching her as if afraid she might disappear if they looked away. Her mother brushed her hair and hummed old songs. Her father sat nearby, silent but present. They did not ask about the forest anymore. They understood that some answers had already been given, and others were not meant to be pulled into the light. When she was strong enough to walk again, the girl returned to her favorite place beneath a wide tree near the fields. Children gathered there, curious but respectful. They no longer mocked her slow movements. Instead, they watched her carefully, learning without realizing it. She spoke to them about patience, about listening before acting, about how not all strength looks the same. These were lessons the village had paid dearly to remember. The elders met often in the weeks that followed. This time, their voices were not filled with argument but reflection. They spoke of balance, of old promises, and of the danger of forgetting the wisdom hidden in African folktales. They restored what had been neglected, offering respect to the land not out of fear, but understanding. The village began to heal, not just in soil and harvest but in spirit. The young man who once mocked her approached her one afternoon. He could barely meet her eyes. "I was wrong," he said simply. She nodded, accepting the words without bitterness. Forgiveness, she knew, was another kind of strength. One that freed both the giver and the receiver. As seasons passed, life returned to its rhythm. The fields flourished. Laughter returned to gatherings. Stories were told around fires again, but now her story was told differently. Not as a warning but as a reminder. A reminder that silence does not mean emptiness, that slowness does not mean weakness, and that judging what we do not understand can blind us to truth. Yet for the girl herself, life felt strangely quiet. The dreams that once guided her never returned. The signs she used to sense so clearly were gone. At first, the silence felt like loss. She wondered who she was without the unseen world speaking to her. But slowly she began to understand. The burden she carried had been lifted. What remained was choice. She chose to live simply. She worked when she wished, rested when she needed, and listened more than she spoke. People no longer measured her worth by speed or effort. They had learned, finally, that value is not always loud. One evening, as she sat watching the sunset, her mother joined her. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly, "now that the voices are gone?" The girl smiled, a real smile free of weight. "No," she replied. "They taught me what I needed. Now I must teach myself." The forest remained quiet but not empty. It watched as it always had, patient and enduring. Balance had been restored, but balance is never permanent. It lives through care, through memory, through stories passed down so they are not forgotten again. The village children grew up hearing her tale, learning not to rush to judgment, learning that every person carries something unseen. And whenever someone was called lazy, an elder would shake their head and say, "Be careful. You may be standing before a strength you do not yet understand." And so the story ended not with fear but with wisdom. Not with power but with peace. A simple African folktale, passed from voice to voice, reminding those who listen that sometimes, the ones we overlook are the ones holding everything together. The words on the screen faded slowly, like mist disappearing under the morning sun. The television went dark again, completely silent. Mama Tola and Saad remained standing where they were, holding each other, afraid that even a small movement might bring the moment back. The rain outside had stopped, and the house felt strangely calm, as if it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Mama Tola gently reached forward and unplugged the television. This time there was no resistance. No flicker. No strange glow. Just an ordinary black screen reflecting her face. She stared at that reflection for a long moment, then nodded to herself. Whatever had been waiting, whatever had spoken through stories and screens, had said what it needed to say. They went to bed that night without fear. Mama Tola slept deeply, undisturbed, and Saad slept too, no longer startled by dreams or sounds. When morning came, sunlight filled the house like a blessing. Birds chirped outside. Life continued, simple and steady. In the days that followed, Mama Tola returned to her normal routine, but something about her had changed. She spoke with more patience. She listened before responding. At the market, when arguments broke out, she smiled and walked away. When neighbors complained, she didn't jump in with loud opinions. People noticed. "You've become very calm," Auntie Beezy said one afternoon, studying her closely. "It's like you found peace." Mama Tola smiled softly. "I learned that not every story needs my voice," she replied. "Some only need my attention." At home, the television remained unplugged for weeks. Not out of fear but out of respect. When Mama Tola finally decided to watch a movie again, she did it during the day with the windows open and sunlight pouring in. She sat quietly, hands folded, watching the story unfold without interruption. No shouting. No arguing. Just listening. Saad watched her mother with admiration. The woman who once battled movie characters like they were real enemies had become someone who understood the power of silence. Saad herself felt changed too. She paid more attention to the stories around her, not just on screens but in people. She listened more closely to her mother, to elders, to even herself. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Saad finally asked the question that had been sitting in her heart. "Mama, do you think the TV was really alive?" Mama Tola thought carefully before answering. "I don't think the television was alive," she said slowly. "I think the lessons were. Stories carry truth, and when you ignore truth long enough, it finds another way to speak." Saad nodded, understanding more than she expected. Weeks passed and the strange events never returned. No flickering screens. No voices in the night. No watching eyes. The house felt like a home again, not a stage for something unseen. One afternoon, Mama Tola took out an old photo album. She and Saad sat together, flipping through pictures of family, laughter, and moments long past. Mama Tola shared stories about her mother and grandmother, about how they believed stories were meant to guide, not entertain alone. She realized that deep down she had always known this. She had just forgotten. That night, Mama Tola stood alone in the living room. The television remained unplugged in the corner. She placed her hand on it gently, not with fear but with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, not knowing exactly who or what she was thanking. "I heard you. Nothing happened. And that was okay." Life moved forward. Mama Tola became known not for her loud voice, but for her wisdom. Neighbors came to her for advice. Saad grew more confident, grounded by the lessons she had witnessed firsthand. The house stayed peaceful, filled with conversation, laughter, and understanding. One final time, months later, during a power outage, the television briefly reflected Mama Tola's face in the dark. She looked at it calmly, her expression steady. She did not speak. She did not argue. She simply turned away and lit a candle. And in that quiet choice, the story truly ended, not with fear or mystery, but with growth, humility, and the understanding that sometimes the most powerful response is knowing when to stay silent. The stories had spoken. Mama Tola had listened. And that was enough.